Now to wrap up our amazing Games Day, we have Jess Loeb, Director of Engineering from Sony Interactive Entertainment.
Hey everyone. As mentioned, my name is Jess Loeb. I've been with Sony Interactive Entertainment for the past 8 years or so, a little over. And among the many hats that I've worn over my course of my time working with the PlayStation ecosystem, one of my absolute favorites was running a 12-week launch readiness program in the run-up to the PS5 release. Whether you're a student or an industry veteran, it's my hope today that you'll leave this talk feeling a little bit inspired to play, even in those high-stakes, can't-fail moments. So, I want you all to time travel with me for a moment. We're going to take a journey together, back to 2019, specifically fall of 2019, when the PS5 release was announced for holiday season of 2020. Obviously, this was a time that came with a lot of excitement, but also a lot of pressure. For me personally, I was also well into my second year of my MBA program at the Wharton School, while working full-time as a principal software engineer at SIE. New parts of the next-gen ecosystem were coming online left and right, new services were talking to each other for the first time, and teams all around the globe had been building out this next-gen ecosystem, working hard on brand new experiences, hardware, games, SDKs, tools, you name it. And we were really focused on delivering these exciting performant experiences to creators and players alike, all in the name of the next generation of play. Now, I want to take a moment here and explain what I mean when I say next generation of play, especially in the context of gaming console releases. You see, modern console generations typically follow a release cycle of about 7 years in between, at least historically. And what this means is that there is a huge anticipation building to holiday season of 2020, because it marks the start of Generation 9, but very notably not the end of Generation 8. Which was already supporting over 100 million active players in the PlayStation ecosystem around the world. On the platform engineering side, we have teams who've been building things for years, experiences, SDKs, all of those things, all while continuing to love and support our existing live operations for Generation 8 and below. So this is a massive moment in the games industry, for the PlayStation brand, and for fans all over the globe. Now, the PS5 has been announced at this point. It's been teased to this eager global fan base, who in winter of 2019 are overflowing with anticipation for what they think the next year is going to bring. But you guys are obviously all very smart, and even if you weren't, you could probably see where this is going. So let's take a leap forward to spring of 2020. And recap, new platform coming online, existing platform base, user base to support, lot to do, but a very little amount of time left before the big day. And then the world starts to shut down as the COVID-19 pandemic spreads. And in the blink of an eye, suddenly we have all the same challenges that we did yesterday, that we did in the fall, that we did in the summer before us. But we also have to figure out how to do it against this unprecedented landscape of change in the technology sector, all while embracing the possibility of possibly having to do this from home. Because again, at this point in time, we don't know what's going to happen. And obviously there was a big question on everyone's mind. How are we going to know if we're ready? Are we going to be ready? And so a handful of us with slightly overactive imaginations were tapped on the shoulder to get together and think about how to best use the time and resources that we had left before the big day and take us into the hands of players and creators from this new virtual hybrid world that we were facing. And so my personal lesson that I learned throughout this process is that you have to both make it and break it in these make it or break it moments. It was at that point in time that I realized I was also in the middle of my own career moment. I was writing less and less code every day, doing more problem solving across the organization. And whatever my official job title was at this point, it was my role to really embrace the uncertainty of the moment and help solve complex problems that needed a little bit of extra energy and a little bit of creativity. So as I share the rest of my story here with you today, I would love for you to keep in mind 3 lessons that I learned repeatedly throughout the summer of 2020. First, be curious in every project. Look into those minute details that make a problem special and complex. What makes it the correct problem for this particular moment in time against the backdrop of big picture circumstances that surround it? Second, have fun. Get caught up in the moment. Opportunities like these come and go, but what I've found is that the greater the stress and the greater the pressure on the moment, the more you're committed to having fun, the more people want to work with you. And the more people want to work with you, the better the solutions become. And finally, be flexible. Obviously, nobody anticipated the world shutting down. Well, maybe some people did. But learning to roll with the punches, embrace the uncertainty of the moment, and adapt and evolve as new information becomes available is critical to making any project a success and making sure you learn as much as you can from the moment when it passes. And so, a brand new constellation of readiness activities start to arise. There's a huge shift in our operations. And every area has its own set of North Stars that they need to follow to make sure that they're doing everything they can to prepare for the big day. Lots and lots of problems arise when you're launching a new next generation console, and you're also supporting cross-generation play in a way that you've never done before. We had to think through applications releasing into production alongside PS4. We had to think about data validation across these different environments. Services were connecting to multiple generations worth of devices and traffic. And some services only supported the new consoles. What do our checkpoints look like in a situation like this? How do we feel confident that we can shut off any unhealthy traffic or behaviors just to the parts that need it? And how do we know that we can see everything that's going on? We had to do a lot of really important things, and we had a lot of really smart and talented people working on them. But we were still struggling to answer a very important question. Is this all going to be enough? And so we had to solve for the dreaded ask again later. We were joking that a magic 8-ball might have just as good a guess as anyone else. Everyone's working their absolute hardest to make this a success. But there was still a lot of uncertainty in the moment. And what we found is that there's actually a lot of power in calling out and naming the uncertainty of the moment. And again, with all of these critical areas having specific programs dedicated to making sure that they're resilient, architecture is sound, all of that, we didn't need to worry about, thankfully. What we needed to worry about is really asking those leaders what they were worried about. What are the integration points that they have any kind of trepidation or would like to see more exploration? What are they worried about that's outside their control that could possibly happen? And as we're sifting through these mountains of, data and programs that are going on, we found that as soon as we started getting people talking, people couldn't shut up. Everyone was concerned about everything under the sun within their area, outside their area, because nobody knew exactly what this was going to look like in the context of doing it all virtually for the first time. How could we? And so what I'm going to do today is I'm going to walk you through the process that a small team of us took in designing a program to address the fated question, ask again later, because we didn't really have a later at this point in time. I'm going to share some great stories from exercises we ran in the run-up to launch, and speak to some of the challenges we faced along the way. So, pre-mortem exercise. This is a great tip that each of you can kind of take home and apply in any project, no matter how small. You want to make the answer to all of these questions yes. And so in the spirit of staying curious and having fun, we decided to just indulge everyone's fears. What could possibly go wrong? For some reason, you're not supposed to ask that. But what we found is that when we conducted a pre-mortem exercise with the intent of teasing out all of that landscape of fears and concerns, we were actually able to get somewhere. So a pre-mortem exercise works by basically unpacking everything that could possibly go wrong went wrong. You put yourself in your shoes 6 months after the program, 1 month after the program, the day after, and you imagine everything is just falling apart. And you ask yourself, okay, what can I see? What does that look like? What am I observing? What am I able to understand about what went wrong the day after? And from there, you can kind of start to tease apart and work backwards and classify, okay, there's a bunch of things that we're worried about related to this, and kind of classify areas of concerns and areas of note that could use further investigation. And once you have these notions, you can kind of build a strategy to figure out how to use the time and resources that you have left to mitigate those concerns and make sure that the big day doesn't go in that catastrophic way. So, rising to meet the moment from where you are. We took all of these challenges uncovered by the pre-mortem, addressed a lot of the stakeholder concerns that were coming in through our various feedback gathering exercises, and decided to build a strategy based on 3 core classifications of issues that we thought would lead to a bad time. First one was obviously communication, especially against the backdrop of a pandemic. Keep in mind, a lot of us are still screaming into the void only to realize that we were on mute for the last half hour at this point in time. This is all brand new to us. We're used to coming into an office 5 days a week still at this point. And so really thinking about how do we address the communication concerns. And our answer was to focus on the people, really build them into structured, cohesive teams that knew how to communicate and collaborate and talk about things holistically. And so structured teams were kind of our answer to communications. There was also a lot of unclear and brand new processes that hadn't been battle tested in production. We knew from running PS5 how things should go. We knew where potential weak points were, but obviously there's only so much you can do before the big launch. And so what we really wanted to do was make sure that every single process given to these people was stress tested, documented, and understood, and every person responsible for executing these processes could give a thumbs up that they were confident they would have to do it if something were on fire and they were addressing, critical feedback in the moment. And finally, these are brand new systems. This is a brand new device. We don't have baseline data for a lot of this stuff. And so how do we quickly sift through tons of signals and orient on the most important things? And our answer to that was obviously practice. People need experience working through these problems cohesively, collaboratively as a team. And they need to make sure that they have all the tools available to them, whether that's dashboards, alerting, monitoring, an escalation path. And so we knew we needed to create conditions for them to practice. Plus, it had 3 Ps. And everybody loves a strategy with alliteration. Part of the reason for that is that a lot of us use our left brain, which is more responsible for logic, when we're engaging, when reviewing plans, especially technical plans. But you can kind of give people a little dopamine hit by giving them a pattern matching example in their brain to kind of light up and be like, yes, that makes sense. So there was already this idea that wargaming might be a tool that we would want to use as a part of this practice, and we ran with it. We had this great strategy full of alliteration. We needed to get tactical. And so part of what we did was we used this wargaming framework to build out a 12-week program to bring some structure to the strategy. We took that first P, people, and we really thought about what the people needed in order to bring that structure to a launch readiness plan. And we decided that the people we wanted to support were really the heroes in this. They were really the ones that were responsible for rising to meet the challenges that either the production release or anyone else threw at them. And so we wanted to bring them into structured teams. And so we had several blue teams, which I'll get more into in a minute, as well as a red team. The blue team were the launch teams. Everyone who was responsible for monitoring, taking action, putting code into next-gen production was a part of a blue team. And we had a couple handful of people who were a little bit more creative and devious in nature, and we were able to form a red team out of them. The second P process really translated well to all of the checkpoints necessary to exit from the program. We only have 12 weeks at this point, and so we needed strategic checkpoints to make sure that we were on track to be able to get to the big day confidently, knowing that this is going to be enough, or as close as we can get. And the third P is practice. So this idea of a red team, making sure each blue team had the right conditions to practice before the big day. When I say blue team, I'm talking about a huge expansive part of the platform ecosystem. These blue teams aren't your normal project teams. They're groups of teams and related departments. Our intent was to get this in front of people quickly so that they knew exactly where and how they belonged into this big construct that we were doing. We wanted to make sure that nobody felt lost along the way and really focus on the people first and foremost. And so each interconnected part of the next-gen facing ecosystem needed ways to communicate and collaborate. We had a lot of really talented subject matter experts across many different teams that didn't have direct experience working together. And we knew how big these teams were. So they needed to be able to prepare run books, they needed to have escalation paths, they needed to know that they're monitoring, alerting, subject matter experts, and stakeholder communication could take place seamlessly in the heat of the moment. And all of these interconnected features and systems needed to be looked at through a new lens, the lens of having a holistic ecosystem coming online. And then there was the red team, the fun part. This is my team, if you can't tell. The red team was responsible for creating the conditions under which the blue team got the opportunities to practice all of the process and tooling and escalation paths available to them. Obviously, this is a short-term team meant to capture a very small window of time. But we also wanted to make it fun. And that's kind of where we took this idea of becoming cartoon villains. It was really important that they have a bad guy of the week, where ultimately our heroes come in, save the day, work together as a team, feel good vibes, learn something along the way about the power of friendship, without anything bad really ever happening. Especially because, keep in mind, we have over 100 million live users on this platform. So we have to do it safely and avoid harming any kind of PS4 traffic along the way. Kind of a tall order. And so we gave ourselves a little bit of structure and a little bit of breathing room to work with, and went with a crawl, walk, run approach. We had to work both forwards and backwards on an incredibly tight deadline. And so how did we do it? We stayed curious about what was going on in each of these blue teams along the way, at any given moment in time. We tried to design fun and zany cartoon villain schemes that were pretty easily thwarted in the beginning and sometimes harder to untangle at the end, but ultimately designed so that our heroes were always successful in learning and moving forward through the program. We also had to be very flexible in our program design. We had no idea when we started what walk and any of those individual exercises needed to constitute. So we kind of worked our way from the outsides in. We knew that we were starting from nothing. We had declared a bunch of people a team. And so we needed to start by giving them the ability to work and communicate as a team, learn how to run a virtual bridge, learn how to make sure that information doesn't get lost in the shuffle. And so that was kind of where we started our crawl, was making sure that they were able to write documentation together, making sure that they felt comfortable sitting on a call for an hour together, knew how to talk to each other, knew who each other were. Because again, a lot of these people hadn't necessarily spent a ton of time working together, huge departments. And then run. We had this idea that at launch, you're not going to have any warning. Things are just going to happen, and you have to be able to detect and respond really well. And so for Run, we had the idea of kind of doing these unannounced activities where they had to practice detecting and resolving incidents, and they weren't really sure which team even owned the response. And then we kind of met in the middle for walk. We decided that we were going to schedule windows of time with specific teams where something was going to happen. So they were going to be ready and primed and show up on this Teams call and able to talk to one another and look for something going wrong. And so we kind of embraced and leaned into this idea of control burns. And I'm going to talk about the 3 types of burns that we really worked with in the program. We knew that natural fires, is what we called them, were going to occur during all of the ongoing readiness, QA, beta activities that were happening as this platform is coming online and coming together, right? That's just a part of getting ready to release software. Things come up. And so our job as the red team was to really maximize the learnings from all of these natural fires and make sure that if one team is solving problems, we're right in there with them. We're learning, we're documenting, we're staying curious about exactly what caused these problems, and able to share those learnings out across the organization. So we started a weekly newsletter as a part of this program where we documented all of these natural fires that coming up. One of my favorite examples was we had a bunch of spikes in telemetry kind of happening, and people weren't actually sure if we had started a fire or not. This was still pretty early days in the program, and so I was getting pinged right and left with people asking, like, are you doing this? Are you doing this? Can you stop? And the answer was no, actually, I can't make it stop. But jumping into a bridge with the people that were kind of tracking things down, I knew nothing about a lot of these systems to start out with, and so really riding along and making sure that as they're going through it, we're kind of going through it with them and helping other people learn from it, created, I think, a lot of trust between the red team and the blue teams, because they felt like we were there on their side, even though we were there to kind of antagonize them a little bit. Induced fires, on the other hand, were things that we did do. So during the walk phase of the program, these were obviously pre-scheduled windows for specific teams. During the run window, they were windows of time that we cleared ahead with our platform monitoring services and stakeholder audience to make sure that we weren't going to interfere with other business activities, but largely unannounced. And so these induced fires required a lot of careful planning, consideration. We had to dive deep into all of the parts of the systems that made different parts of our platform work. We had to really become both deeply technical and holistic and broad in terms of the teams themselves. And so we had long checklists that we had to do to make sure that we were preparing to really control these fires, establish strong control lines, that way they couldn't get out of control, and make sure that we could clean up after ourselves and learn things. And then the third kind we kind of thought of are these looming fires, and they're the kinds of things that you can't actually do in a realistic production environment. But we wanted to make sure that as we were moving towards launch, the exercises that we did along the way helped prepare us and ease fears about any large looming concerns that we couldn't do anything about. And so every week, the blue team saw a sign just like this, expressing the danger of fire to the team. And really, we wanted to make sure that especially during the crawl phase, we were building a strong relationship with the blue teams, embracing that spirit of curiosity, learning everything we could about them as they were learning about each other. It was a great opportunity for us. And so for the crawl phase, rather than light any fires, all we did was document things that happened naturally and sit with the teams as they learned how to be teams, which was actually really cool. We trained people how to read our communications and establish trust with our stakeholders. The exit criteria for this early phase was that each team wrote a document describing what the team looked like, and they were able to hang out on a virtual bridge together and learn how to talk to one another. We also used this time to desperately figure out what the heck are we going to do during the walk phase, because we had some fires to light and we had some analysis to do based on everything that we were learning in real time. And so one of the things that came up repeatedly during that early stakeholder feedback was really this idea of infrastructure connections. PlayStation relies heavily on AWS for a lot of our services and tools. And so from that perspective, we had a lot of great patterns to follow. We had a lot of server-to-server infrastructure endpoints that made a lot of sense to kind of treat as our initial set of targets. And so we started with auth. We felt like that was a really central service that we would be able to observe things. We knew enough about how the system worked with caching tokens to be able to script out a whole burn window. And we were able to do it in a way that kept our platform secure and not take any action against PS4 users, because PS5 authentication happens separately from PS4. So what that actually looked like in terms of a timeline is we had a setup phase before anything actually happened. We needed to make sure that we had a plan cleared, we had enough time on either end of the activity to make sure that we weren't going to interfere with production business activities. And we had also to give ourselves time to really learn and adapt and be flexible with the timing and make sure that all of the setup conditions were met. And then at some point, we drop the match. We stop issuing auth tokens to new PS5 devices, which again are kind of dev kits and test kits at this point. There's no production PS5s. And we wait for the cache to expire. So we're sitting on a team bridge as the blue team is kind of monitoring and looking. We've got client engineers, server engineers, everything in between. And we're all just kind of hanging out. And all of a sudden, these cached auth tokens start expiring. And we watch the teams kind of pick up on errors. First on the client side, they start looking around and hey, we see some errors, yay. So they're looking into these errors, they're drilling and diagnosing. One of my favorite quotes from the whole program happens. This client engineer is really emphatically explaining the error to the server engineers. And the server engineer is sitting there and he's like, I'm not seeing any errors on our side. And this goes on for a few minutes, and then a light bulb moment happens for, I think, everyone involved. And all of a sudden he says, oh, I'm not seeing any traffic either. And that was kind of an aha moment of everyone kind of tunneling in on the thing that they've been working really hard on for months or years at this point, but not having the context of the broader ecosystem. And it really set the stage for the amount of learnings that we were going to apply through the rest of the program. Then, of course, the resolution happens. We bring auth back online. We do whatever cleanup we need to do. We held a debrief with every single team after every single fire we started to make sure that we on the red team were staying engaged, being curious, and really approaching this from a mindset of helpfulness. And I think it also helped everyone have a little bit more fun because we could all kind of laugh about it together afterwards. Of course, the meanest thing we did was actually nothing at all. So as I've described the anatomy of these burns, we had this crazy idea. We could have a lot of fun and be really mean by scheduling a burn window with a team and lying. So we identified our target. We wanted to pick a blue team that we thought could handle it, and also that had enough going on in their holistic ecosystem that it made sense that they would want to be able to drill and diagnose across a broad area of the platform without necessarily knowing exactly where to go. And so we identified our target, which in our case was our media-focused blue team, and we recruited some accomplices. We had a lot of beta testers, and so we picked a handful of them that we felt like we could trust and explain what was going on to, and we fed them a lie. We said, hey, we're going to announce a burn in the take-home beta channel, and we're going to have people try to test this user flow, and I'd like for you to lie. I'd like for you to say something to the effect of, I'm seeing these errors while doing this activity. And some of them did. And we also, had the broad beta tester set. So a lot of them were reporting successes. And so we were able to simulate from a user feedback perspective kind of an intermittent issue that didn't always happen, which lent credibility to this lie that we told. And from there, we kind of watched everyone start frantically diving through different reports, metrics, errors, warnings, telemetry, just looking for something that didn't exist. And we learned a ton. Oh my goodness. The biggest surprise in doing nothing at all was actually how many real issues we found. Because when people don't know what they're looking for, they're going to pay attention to things that normally fall below the signal to noise ratio and follow even the smallest of clues. So they were able to identify several warnings and errors that were kind of getting in the way of them actually being able to confidently say, we're good or we're not good. And it helped the team take a good hard look at their data holistically, identify missing telemetry that they wanted to track but weren't necessarily already doing, and work together to try and trace down root causes of things in real time. So the power of helping a team do nothing really led to a lot. And it raised a lot of thoughtful questions like, is our instrumentation good enough? Are our dashboards sufficient? Do all of our critical integration points with third-party applications behave the way we expect them to all the time? And so we started to ramp up the heat. As we completed these initial control burns, teams were really kind of getting into the spirit. We were starting to have some fun. We were still doing our weekly newsletters and making sure everyone was learning as much as possible. But it was time to run. There are massive areas where ownership is ambiguous and parts of the ecosystem are critical. And so we wanted to design things that affected multiple teams at once, where ownership was ambiguous. Teams had gotten really good at getting online together at a specific time and working together as a team, knowing it was their issue. But that's not how the real world works. And so rather than proactively invite people to a call, we had to design these cross-organizational collaboration opportunities and really check and see if the crawl and the walk phase had worked. And so what's better than lighting one thing on fire? Lighting two things on fire. So what we decided to do was we had two simultaneous incidents that we triggered in the span of half an hour of each other without warning anyone except for the stakeholders responsible for helping us keep the burns contained if anything were to go wrong. But preparing for anything and making sure that they can sift through conflicting information as it's coming in and decide who owns the problem and who owns the stakeholder communication, who owns the escalation path. And of course, we wanted them to practice escalating. We were prepared to make sure that the team waiting for escalation knew exactly what was going on and was ready to resolve the incident as soon as they were reached out to. And they were actually kind of left waiting a while. Part of the challenge here was because they were chasing multiple leads, and people kind of knew that we still have day jobs, right? We're still preparing to launch a console. We have a lot of work to do in a very little amount of time. People didn't always feel the most confident bugging somebody on another team. And so this was a really great eye-opening moment that we have to treat these things as real. We have to treat this as a real problem in production with PS5 traffic, which it was. The fact that nobody had PS5s yet was just kind of bonus. And so we learned a lot from doing this. It was a fantastic reminder of the importance of being flexible. We on the red team were obviously waiting for them to perform the escalation and communicating with the teams that were going to be escalated to. And the blue team wasn't doing what we expected them to do. So we decided to focus on communication and facilitation and really give them space to come to the conclusion that they needed to take these steps themselves. We also were really curious about the way that they went about escalations and engaged other teams outside. So we were able to learn from that too on the red side. Now, not every burn went according to plan. So, as a part of launching a next-gen console that is cross-gen compatible with PS4, mobile hit both endpoints at this point, and PS5, we had to think about how are we going to take down traffic to PS5s without touching the parts of the ecosystem that are in players' hands, right? And so this is one that we spent months preparing for. We created a server-to-server endpoint for PS5-only traffic that was related to a critical system that a bunch of things touched. And we spent months working with platform leadership to make sure that anyone owning PS5 services hit this endpoint and this endpoint alone and left the PS4 endpoint alone. And simultaneously, we stressed the importance of doing this for telemetry reasons, doing this for all of the other readiness activities. So we kind of had some cross-program partnership going on. What ended up happening was we did too good a job of hyping up this mysterious new endpoint. And one of our cross-generational services actually hooked up with the PS5 server-to-server endpoint. And it was awesome. It was a great learning opportunity. We had done such a good job of preparing these teams that everyone else's alerting told us that we had caused an unintended problem within seconds. And we were able to reverse course within minutes because of all those carefully laid control burn boundaries that we put up front. We had a plan, we knew how to execute. Nobody wants to have to execute one of those fallback plans in production. But it was a great learning opportunity for us and the blue teams and kind of emphasize that we are all on the same team here. And being able to really work with them to debug these issues spoke to how far our detection and alerting and kind of camaraderie in preparing for this big critical moment had come. We were all kind of having fun together and able to laugh at ourselves, which made a huge difference. And so, how did it end up? We came up with some pretty impressive numbers at the end of the program. 12-week program, we had 28 exercises with over 70 hours of burn time. Each weekly newsletter detailed natural fires as well as induced ones, all of the learnings, all of the rollbacks that happened in production, releases, you name it. But at the end of the day, we had all these learnings, we had this great momentum. It was momentum. We built towards other moments that then picked up. And so we said goodbye to the red team. And this was kind of my end of Cartoon Villain Summer. I was left knowing that our activities had reached their natural conclusion. And whether or not it was going to be enough for launch, we had done absolutely everything we could with the time we had left. Other readiness activities picked up and brought structure where we left off. Teams focused really on building on this camaraderie and harmony that they created in advance of day of operations. So the stage is set, and whether or not launch was going to be a success, the moment was over. And spoiler alert, it was. But what I personally learned throughout all of these activities is that it's better together. It's important to be curious. It's important to have fun. It's important to be flexible. These are all critical lessons that I've taken forward with me since launch, and they've served me really well in ambiguous situations over the years since. But nothing exists in a vacuum, and it's always better with a team. These lessons inspired me to make my own career shift away from being a principal engineer and moving into the director role. And I'm honored to get to spend the next several of my moments of my career building teams of curious, fun-loving, and resilient technologists. So, finding the best play to play with those big ideas and big moments is a very personal decision. For me, it was often easy to identify those big moments because working in games, it's pretty obvious console launch, gonna be kind of a big deal. Lots of hype around releasing a game, but it can be something as small as reaching out to a coworker when you think they're having a rough time, or putting a prototype in front of somebody and gathering feedback. Sometimes that looks like any number of activities that you have to engage in to build that momentum for yourself. But ultimately, it's what we take away from these little moments along the way that shape the broader arcs of our career and those bigger moments that we're able to kind of have our small part to push forward. And so I challenge each of you, when your moment arrives, build on those little moments, build your own momentum, stay curious, have fun. Don't be afraid to have fun even in the most serious moments. Thank you. And I know I'm way over time, but I also wanted to give a special thank you to all of the SINFO organizers. You are all so passionate, engaged, talented. I can't wait to see where you all go in your careers. I'm truly inspired by each of you.
Now, I think we have time for one or two questions before we do the Pick a Winner prize, and you can talk a little bit more with Jess on the second stage. So, who has questions? Okay.
Thank you so much for the talk. After this exercise, what culture change did you observe, and can you still see it at Sony?
Great question. So yes, there have been a lot of cultural changes that happen, maybe not specifically because of this program, but a part of the general momentum of things. There's a lot less separation between the client and the server than there used to be. It used to be that the two were kind of working very interdependently but independently. And now you see a lot more holistic collaboration and a lot more focus on kind of that end-to-end observability and can we feel confident that we know we're doing the right thing that didn't exist before. There's also a ton of camaraderie around people who kind of went through it together. So yeah, I think there's been a lot of positive momentum that's carried forward from the program.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for your question. I'll now do the Pick a Winner, and you can talk with Jess later on the second stage. I'd like to thank Jess once again for the amazing keynote. Now, the winner for the Corsair M75 wireless RGB mouse is... Tijdehan? Please come up stage to accept your prize.
Register with a fake name. Thank you.